Hey guys, how are we all going? Um, First off, uh, once again, I know I've said this a few times this season, but I'd really like to thank everyone who joined the league and gave it a go this season. I know some people didn't like some aspects of it. Personally, I think it's the best league that I've got going at the moment. Definitely, it's definitely, for the most part, the most active league that we had running as well. Um, the You'll always see transactions turn over much easier when everything doesn't have to run through a waiver run, in my opinion. Um, I know a lot of guys don't like to even submit waivers. So um, just the ability to pick up a player whenever you sort of feel like it, it, it keeps everything a bit more active. So trading was probably quieter than I thought it would be. I thought there'd be more trades. I think going forward there will be eventually too, possibly even during the off season as people try to strengthen their potentially strengthen their keepers and stuff. So, um, yeah, that'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But definitely great to get to our first lot of playoffs in this league. So, um, which brings me to why I'm here. You can see on the screen behind me here, I've got the playoff bracket sitting there. I wonder if there's a better version of this. I don't think it's going to look much different. Yeah, actually, that's probably easy to look at. So, here we go. All right. First game I'm going to talk about. The number three, from the Lambeau Conference, the number 3 seed, Chicago Tigers, up against the number 6 seed, Washington Redskins. The Tigers finished 14-10 in the regular season. The Redskins finished at 12-12. Um, the Tigers come in after scoring over 500 in their Week 12 matchup against the Wolverines, I think it was. Um, that helped secure them the number 3 seed. I think they were just about, if they weren't in the playoffs, they were pretty much just about in the playoffs heading into week 12. Um, what have I got there? In their only previous meeting, the Tigers actually won their head-to-head matchup by about 30 points. So as for the Redskins, um, they were touch and go whether they could make the playoffs. They needed a win and probably a bonus win because I don't believe their points for and against would have. Oh, their points for, sorry, would have. Yeah, yeah. If it had come down to a tiebreaker between them and the Muncie Flyers, they would have just bowed out by 25 points. So that bonus win was the winner for Perry and the Redskins this week. So without that, they wouldn't have made the playoffs. Um, Redskins, their most important players, in my opinion, offensively, it's Trey McBride and Josh Allen. Um, McBride's got an interesting matchup against the Vikings. and Josh Allen. Who are they up against? They are. I can't remember now. The Bills. I did have it written down somewhere. Of course. Now that I'm doing this, I can't see it anyway. So, utilize this. Yeah. Bills. Who the heck are they playing? This is gonna. And there he is. No. No. There. They are playing. I know this game. Oh, the 49ers. That's right. Who knows if that's a tough matchup or not? The 49ers are not travelling well at all right now. They got lit up last week, which I must admit I expected. You take out Purdy, Nick Bosa, and God, whoever else was missing at the time. Pretty hard. It's hard to win with a backup quarterback. It's even harder when you start to pull backups out of your for trying to cover everywhere, as well as the backup quarterback. So, defensively, I thought their best couple of players were Roquan Smith and Kirby Joseph. I'm interested to see Roquan plays. He's got probably a nice matchup to try and score some points up against the Eagles, but he missed the game this week, and I don't know whether. I don't know how much of an injury cloud he's under. I don't even know what the injury was that he missed it for. So, and Kirby Joseph, who's playing in the Thanksgiving Day game against the Bears. So, Bears are starting to move the ball quite well. So, there should be opportunities there for Kirby Joseph. Tigers, their trio of Ravens, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and Zay Flowers will be probably the most prominent figures on offense. Up against the Eagles, that can be a tough matchup. Scary thing for scary thing for Jared here. If he manages to win, none of those guys will be available next week. All sitting on week 14 buys, so we'll see. Defensively, I thought his best two guys have been Andrew Van Ginkel, who has had an amazing season. I can't believe the season he's had. He's going up against the Cardinals. And Xavier McKinney, who's had a really nice season too, goes up against the Dolphins. I think it'll be a pretty close game, with mostly what hinges on how the Ravens perform against the Eagles. If the Ravens lay an egg, which they haven't, but if that happens, I think this game is wide open for the Redskins to win. I'm not tipping that. I'm tipping the Tigers to win. But yeah, I don't think there's a lot in the game. There's not between most of these teams anyway, to be honest. But yeah, as long as the Ravens have a semi-decent offensive output against the Eagles, then I believe the Tigers have the upper hand here. All right. The next game, the Milwaukee Badgers, number 5 seed, 13-11 during the regular season, up against the Detroit Wolverines, the number 4 seed, and 14-10 during the regular season. Badgers are one of my teams. I felt like it was a team always kind of struggling to gain any momentum during the season. Um, Ended up winning 3 in a row head to head to finish the season and scrape into the playoffs. I think there's some good players on it, but it was it was a struggle. And for the Wolverines, they actually started the season off really well. They actually looked like one of the top couple of teams in the conference. But I think they've lost. Yeah, they lost 3 in a row heading into the playoffs, and have started not scoring particularly well. Last week was a bit of a bounce back. They actually cracked the 400 points last week. But I know the couple of weeks leading up to that were a struggle. Um, Maybe that was tied into bye weeks and stuff. I didn't go too deeply into it. Um, the one previous meeting, the Badgers won a low scoring game by about tickle throat by about 18 points. So offensively, I think my main two players that I need to fire this week are probably the two quarterbacks, Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes. Herbert's up against the Falcons, so should be a relatively favourable matchup. And Mahomes is up against the Raiders. Once again, probably looks like a pretty decent matchup. So we'll see. Those divisional matchups certainly can play it differently than you think they would on paper. So, but Mahomes finally looks like he's actually starting to score lately. So, see if he can continue it. Defensively for this team, Myles Garrett, Will Anderson, Buda Baker, and Julian Love probably the most important pieces. Garrett's been very hot and cold. He'll have a big week, and then I think he's thrown up a couple of zeros this season. Sorry, so hopefully that's not one of them this week. For the Wolverines, very strong, a couple of strong Philadelphia pieces here. Being an Eagles fan, not particularly surprising. Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, probably the two most important pieces on offense. And they will be playing against the Ravens. Get used to hearing this, because that matchup is probably one of the most important matchups in the league this week. There are a lot of teams with players, big time players. Barkley, I think, just about pops up in every conference. So, and I did have a thought that the Ravens defense, which was great last season, has been leaking points a bit this season. I think it's come on a little bit lately. Possibly whether that's just the opponents they've played against or what, I don't know. But I don't think it's as epically bad as it was at mid-season. But we'll see. Josh Jacobs is also there. He's got a pretty good matchup up against the Dolphins. Then defensively, Trey Hendrickson, Frankie Louvet, Robert Spillane have all had pretty good seasons this season. Probably their most important defensive pieces. I thought this was a tough matchup. I do slightly lean to the Wolverines, but nothing at all would surprise me in this game. I don't know. I just think if Hurts and Barkley have huge games, Barkley's last week was ridiculous. If he gets anywhere near that again, then this game's probably cooked, I'd say. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Anything can happen in these games. All right. The Brown Conference. All right. We got the number 6 Houston Oilers, 11-13 during the regular season. And I think that is the only sub 500 team that made the playoffs. So, and the New York Cardex, the number 3 seed at 15-9. And they've got a tough team too. So final week of the season, the Oilers needed multiple miracles to happen. And somehow the stars aligned and they make the playoffs. They needed the Portsmouth Spartans to not win and get the bonus win. The Portsmouth Spartans scored 500 points and didn't win their head-to-head matchup. Their friend who they recruited into the league for me, the Miami Seahawks, beat them by 10 points, scoring 510 something. That was nuts. Then the St. Louis Rams, I don't think a head-to-head win would have been enough for them, actually. I do believe... Where are we? I don't think the head-to-head would have been enough. No, Kenneth hadn't covered on points scored. So the Rams had to win 2 games the way it had played out. They lose by 7 points and miss the bonus win by about 8 points, roughly, I think it was. And the Oilers had to win and get a bonus win. So it was a kind of a Houdini act to even get into the playoffs. So everything else from here on is an absolute bonus. Cardex, they were in the playoffs last week. Didn't need to win. Didn't matter. And didn't win and probably had their worst output of the season. They were still in contention for a division title, but wouldn't have got it anyway. So, at the end of the day, number 3 seed was pretty much where they were going to be. The Oilers actually own the head-to-head matchup at the only game that they played against each other this season. Back in week 3, they won by about 20 points. I think the most important, the Oilers' offense is scary. The biggest problem for them is quarterback. They really are struggling in that spot. But I'm assuming they'll probably start Anthony Richardson, and if he can actually put up a decent score, they'll be off to a good start. But Saquon Barkley, once again, up against the Ravens. Jahmyr Gibbs against the Bears, and Jamar Chase against the Steelers. They are their biggest offensive weapons that they will need to fire this week. Then you got Trey Hendrickson, Will Anderson, Trevon Walker, and Julian Love on defense. So they've actually got some pretty strong pieces. I remember thinking after the draft when I was doing the preseason projections that Kenneth's Oilers actually had a pretty strong lineup, but it was all predicated on how the quarterbacks go. I think he's got Kirk Cousins and Anthony Richardson. I'm not sure if he's got anything else, but I think that's... Kirk Cousins, Anthony Richardson, Gardner Minshew's nothing. Sam Howell's never stepped foot on the field, so that's the spot, man. Like if you can get some competent production out of those guys, this team's dangerous. Kind of glad that if he manages to pull the win off, that my team doesn't have to play it next week, because he's got guys there that can absolutely explode. Cardex, they'll be hoping for a big performance this week from Justin Jefferson, bouncing back against the Cardinals. He had a bit of a average showing last week. Garrett Wilson against the Seahawks. Who knows what's going on at the Jets? That's just turned into an absolute mess. Hoping, obviously, to see Brock Purdy back against the Bills. Purdy doesn't play, I think. Where are we? If Purdy doesn't play, it's tough. He's got Caleb. Caleb started to really come on of late, actually. He's played fantastic football the last 2 weeks. And last week was against a tough defense. Both of them were. The Packers and Vikings have got two of the best rated defenses in the league. So, and Drake May, who I'm sure he scored pretty solidly, but if you need him as a spot starter, you can start him. So, yeah. If you can get around that sort of 20 points, you got to be happy with that. Just roll with it and get out of it. Got a number of good defenders too. I got DeForest Buckner, Brian Burns, Zach Bourne, and EJ Speed, probably their most prominent defenders. EJ Speed was a really nice draft pick for anyone that managed to land him, because generally he wasn't going particularly early either. Most of us were trying to avoid week 14 bye weeks as well. But I know I landed Speed in a couple of leagues and he's been really good this season. Buckner's always great. Burns bounced back this year. He'd been pretty bad the last couple of seasons, in my opinion. But yeah, I think he's probably thrived under the Giants scheme. And Zach Bourne's definitely thrived as a probably waiver wire pickup in week 1, I'd say. Had a massive game that first week and has kept it going throughout the season. Look at here. I reckon the Oilers have definitely got parts that could be very, very scary for the Cardex in this matchup. It'll depend on what their quarterbacks do. They've let them down pretty much for the whole season. If they can continue to do so, then I'd say she's lights out for the Oilers, and the Cardex will be moving on to week 2 of the playoffs. For that reason, I'll take the Cardex, who have been a far more consistent commodity this season. And I just feel better about the fact that they will put up a good score this week and move on to the next week. But the Oilers definitely can win this game. Don't worry about that. I know I said they were probably the only team below 500 to make the playoffs, but I don't think it was a below 500 roster. So just shows you how important quarterbacks can be in these leagues. Under the Superflex format, where you can start 2 of them, you need to have a couple that can actually play. All right, next game. Number 4, Miami Seahawks. They finished 14-10 up against the number 5 New York Bulldogs, who finished 13-11. I think both teams pretty much ended the last week as pretty decent chances to make the playoffs. The Seahawks, I've kind of touched on this one already, vanquished Fabian's Spartans in the last week in just a crazy game, man. Over 1,000 points scored. I would say it was probably one of our highest scoring games, but I haven't checked to see what I haven't checked to see if that was the case. I don't know if it would have made it into the top scorers. I'll check it while I'm talking here. Just a crazy matchup. Yeah, it slots in as number one. I was going to say there was another game last week where one team scored an absolute shit ton of points that I thought might have given it a run for its money, but there you go, 1,010.95 and a 9.43 margin of victory. That's how close Fabian come to making the playoffs. Yeah, crazy game. And the Bulldogs, they win last week. Oh, they did too. They were the other component to the Oilers making the playoffs. The Bulldogs held on for about a 7-point win against the St. Louis Rams, which in part then took down the Rams and their playoff chances. The only matchup this season between these two teams was a win for the Seahawks by about 40 plus points in week 7. Seahawks probably, they got a pretty strong team, but they'll be doing this with one quarterback. Patrick Mahomes is their only quarterback who plays the Raiders this week. Not the most ideal scenario. Alvin Kamara, who plays the Rams. Josh Jacobs against the Dolphins and Kyron Williams against the Packers. Travis Kelce against the Raiders are probably all of their most prominent offensive guys, and really need them to fire this week, especially when you're sitting there with starting one quarterback. You can win these leagues with one quarterback. You need that one quarterback to be firing, and you need 7 other offensive starters that are scoring quite well to be a chance. Defensively, Myles Garrett, Jeffrey Simmons, Fred Warner, Jermaine Pratt, Jalen Petrie, Deshaun Elliott. Probably all their most prominent pieces. If Myles Garrett has another performance like he did last week, then that will go a long way to contributing towards a win for the Seahawks. Yeah. So you just want your guys to go out there and do what they've been doing pretty much. If you can get some sort of consistent score there, that's what you hope for. For the New York Bulldogs, Davo's team, Lamar, it's just been ridiculous this season, really. I think he's got like 30 touchdowns or something and 3 interceptions. And I saw the 3 interceptions, and I think every single one of them bounced off one of his receivers' hands. So, obviously they're playing the Eagles. Jared Goff is probably his other quarterback starter going against the Bears. And then you got Joe Mixon, pretty solid matchup against the Jags, who haven't done a lot of anything good this season. Defensively, Danielle Hunter, who has been absolutely smoking the last couple of weeks. TJ Watt and the guy who I think's clearly the best rookie defender, in my opinion, Jared Verse. Zoya Franklin, Kirby Joseph. I actually think this matchup is close. I think the Seahawks have got a better roster at the top end of the things, but the Bulldogs can most certainly give them a fright here. I do slightly lean to the Seahawks. I think they've been a bit more consistent this season, and that just makes it easy to go down that path, in my opinion. But yeah, nothing shocks me here. And nor should it do. I said you're not going to get bad teams in the playoffs generally, so um, should be a good close game, I think. Lombardi Conference. Oh man, this game is killing me. The number 3 ranked Racine Legion finished the regular season 17-7, up against the number 6 seed New York Yankees, who finished at 13-11 on the season. Best thing for these two teams last week meant absolutely nothing. Didn't matter win, lose, or draw. The seedings could have changed a little bit. Racine wasn't. They were locked in as number 3 the week before. The Yankees could have possibly landed somewhere between 4 and 6, but after the other two teams, the 4 and 5 seeds, won, it didn't matter. They were locked in as the number 6 seed. So, the regular season record between these two teams, they played twice. The Yankees were actually the last team to beat Racine by about 60 points back in week 8. And then Racine had won their previous matchup in week 2. Racine come into this game. They're on a 4-game winning streak, and the last two games have been very close or over 500 points. The last week's effort, I think it was about 520 points or something. The more impressive part of that was without Joe Burrow or Jamar Chase. Scary, but I own this team. I've felt like this was my legitimately. No, I'm not going to touch on that yet. Anyway, so the offense, Joe Burrow plays the Steelers. It's an ugly matchup. Saquon Barkley against the Ravens, Jahmyr Gibbs against the Bears, Jamar Chase against the Steelers, and Trey McBride against the Vikings. They're all chances to explode on any given week, and I sure as hell hope that Burrow and Chase can keep what they've been doing going this week. It is a tough matchup against the Steelers, though. Defensively, Max Crosby, Jonathan Grenard, Harold Landry, and Kyle Hamilton are probably their strongest pieces. Just need those guys to show up and score something near their average at least to just keep things ticking over. The Yankees got off to a slow start this season. I think they had a really bad first 3 games or something like that. I know they were sitting pretty low, but everything sort of clicked after that. But then last 3 games, they've actually lost their last 3 head-to-heads. But they're obviously, I know the team owner pretty damn well, and I know he knows what he's doing. So I don't think there's no gimmies in these games, and this is probably a matchup I was hoping to avoid, and I think he was thinking vice versa. To be honest, he didn't want to run into this team. I think his words to me the other day, he said something along the lines of, "Now I've got to play your team that's hot as shit right now." I said, "Yeah, we all know how fantasy football works, mate." I said, every time you score a big score, you're getting one game closer to the game where your team shits the bed. So that's my biggest concern. Well, offensively for the Yankees, Jared Goff up against the Bears, I think it's his most favourable quarterback matchup. Kittle against the Bills always scores when he's on the field. Cortland Sutton's been on fire lately for the and he's going up against the Browns. Terry McLaurin, I don't think he had much of a game last week outside of that one catch at the end of the game. But I mean, you go 86 yards or whatever it was on your last catch, and that's definitely going to bump up your receiving numbers. He's up against the Titans, and the Garrett Wilson up against the Seahawks. I think they're all your biggest parts. Interesting to see how the how the Jets go this week. I'm glad I don't have many of them. Certainly not offensive players anyway, because I don't know that whole thing looks like it's falling apart big time. Defensively, they'll have their fingers crossed that Nick Bosa can play this week. Byron Young, Zach Bourne, Bobby Wagner, I think also look like they're probably their strongest defensive pieces. I viewed Racine as my only legitimate shot of being a chance to win this league. Obviously, I mean, you heard the offensive players I've got there. If they put it together equally on a given week, they can beat anyone. But so it sucks when you're trying to do this from the first week of the playoffs. It's very hard to basically just keep winning. It's all head-to-head matchups now. Nothing else matters anymore. So, finished the season as the league's second highest scoring team. One of only 3 that cracked the 5,000 point mark on the season. So, because I'm playing who I am, and I know he puts good teams together, the Yankees most certainly can win this game. I'm not tipping them, so you can breathe a sigh of relief there, Matt. I'm not doing it. I'm going to tip my team. I don't do it very often. I'd be the last person in the world that wants to give myself a pat on the back because I've got a good team. But if it fires this week, I think it wins. But it's a matter of whether it does or not. It's been hot for the last few weeks, but I've only got to go back to the last time I played Matt's team, and it didn't fire at all. So, yeah. Good luck, Matt. And anything can happen. What do we got next? All right. The number 5 seed Providence Steamrollers finished the season 14-10 up against the Rochester Jeffersons. Number 4 seed finished also at 14-10. Same as the last matchups, mate. Both these teams were simply playing for seedings this week. Both managed to get bonus wins last week, and both come into the postseason on winning streaks. The Jeffersons, I think, won 4 in a row, and the Steamrollers won 3 in a row. Their regular season matchups ended up actually 2-0 to the Jeffersons. One was a 30-point win back in week 5. The other was a 40-point win back in week 9. Jefferson's had an interesting draft strategy this year. They went with quite a young lineup. They also rolled the dice and took Anthony Richardson with the number 1 pick. That hasn't worked out at all. And for that reason, they're still, much like the Oilers team that I spoke about before, they're sitting, who also drafted Anthony Richardson, sitting there with a bit of a struggle at quarterback, but they definitely are in a decent spot in a number of other places on offense. So Brock Bowers plays the Chiefs this week. Chiefs, I know a lot of people think the Chiefs have got a pretty good defense, but they actually defend the tight end horrifically. They've got some of the worst numbers in the league. I'm sure they won't try and single cover Bowers, but I don't know. It could be a massive week for Bowers. And in my opinion, he should be the rookie of the year. I don't think any of the quarterbacks should be picked over him. What he's doing doesn't get done very often by a player in that position. So almost never, actually. Derrick Henry is another integral piece, playing the Eagles this week, and Amon-Ra St. Brown up against the Bears. But they've got a bunch of young wide receivers who can put up numbers. I'm pretty sure they've got Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas Jr., who've all had pretty solid. Wow, I wouldn't say Marvin Harrison Jr. hasn't had a particularly solid season. I think he's been pretty ordinary, actually. But Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. have both had really good seasons. Couple that up with some defensive players. Myles Garrett, Nick Bonito, Dayan Henley, Fred Warner, Brandon Jones, Xavier McKinney, probably all some of their most prominent defensive pieces. And probably will go a long way to see if this team can advance to the next week. Steamrollers don't have any issues at quarterback. They will be starting Josh Allen up against the 49ers, and who else was it? Oh, Jaden Daniels up against the Titans. Then probably the next most prominent player is Travis Kelce, who's up against the Raiders. He had a really poor start to the season, but definitely picked it up from like a few weeks into the season onwards. So, defensively, Daniil Hunter, Budda Baker, Brian Branch, probably their most important pieces. They really need those guys to fire. Daniil Hunter's been on fire. Budda Baker's had an amazing season. So has Brian Branch. So, all those three players go off, then it'll be a big step towards the Steamrollers advancing to the next week. I really don't think there's much between these two teams. The quarterback problems that the Jeffersons have make it hard for me to confidently tip them in this matchup, and for that reason, I'm going to tip the Steamrollers to win a really close game. I just find it hard to trust what the Jeffersons quarterbacks can do, but if they strike any form of a good game this week, then they most certainly can and will roll on to the next week. So, last conference. But the Hallis Conference, brutal conference, this bloody thing. The number 6 seeded Pottsville Maroons. I'm going to call it Maroons. Fuck this. I don't know why I say Maroon. We're not on an island. 13-11 against the number 3 seeded Buffalo Bison, who finished 15-9. The Maroons were actually my preseason favourite in this league. They They got a really low-scoring win against the Cleveland Rams last week, who, let's be honest, weren't even trying to win. To sneak into the playoffs. And the Bison, I think they got the two wins. They were up against the Senators last week. I can't remember exactly what the score was. It wasn't a huge margin, but Buffalo's been pretty damn consistent all season. So their only previous matchup was won by the Bison with about an 80-point win back in week 2. It was actually a high-scoring matchup. I think off the top of my head, it was about, say, 500 plus points for the Bison up against 420 something, I think it was, for the Maroons. So certainly not wasn't a bad performance from Pottsville at all. It was just a big performance by Buffalo. So you'd think if you scored 500, you got it pretty close to being a shorter win. So Maroons offense is led by probably Rookie of the Year favourite right now, in my opinion, Bo Nix, up against the Browns. Joe Mixon's up against the Jaguars. CeeDee Lamb against the Giants, and Travis Kelce against the Raiders. It'll be Bo Nix obviously is benefiting from having a really good coach in Sean Payton that knows what he's doing. Unlike another rookie quarterback that just might be on a team that I follow, who has probably the least most competent head coach in the NFL. So I'll leave it at that. Defensively, Keon White, Myles Garrett. I don't know how to say this dude's name. Is it Jermaine? I'm going to go with Jermaine Sherwood. I don't know. It could be Jamian. I don't know. Whatever. Trayvon Moehrig and Jalen Petrie. Probably their most important pieces on defense. Sherwood's actually had a really good season and has kept Mosley out of the team pretty much. So for the Bison, they'll be hoping that Tua Tagovailoa up against the Packers can continue his very good play that he's had since he come back from concussion. I think he's had it was 11 touchdowns to 1 interception or something like that since he come back. And also chasing strong performances from Jahmyr Gibbs up against the Bears and Devon Achane also against the Packers. Justin Jefferson against the Cardinals. The Cardinals' defense has actually played pretty well this year. I think it was... They'd gone a couple of games without giving up a touchdown there the last few weeks. So defensively, I think this has been the strong point of the Bison team. They've had some really good standout defensive performance. Zach Allen's had a huge season. Kobe Turner also. Jonathan Grenadi, Jay Speed, and Xavier McKinney, I think, were all integral parts as well. I think they're quite a strong team, the Bison. Pre-season, I would have picked the Maroons to win this game, but we're not at that point anymore, are we? I think the Bison win this game, unless Mike's team really fires this week, and he's going to need to. The Bison have been pretty damn consistent all season. And I've got no reason to think that won't be the case again this week. But it's also fantasy football and anything can happen, can't it? So I'll lean to the Bison winning anyway. Last matchup. The number 5 Frankfurt Yellow Jackets finished the season 14-10 up against the number 4 seed Chicago Cardinals, who also finished at 14-10. The Cardinals come into this game dropping the league's biggest score ever so far. I know this is the first season, but I also don't anticipate that score to get beaten anytime soon. 586.48 points in 1 week is absolutely insane, and they completely smashed any playoff dreams that the Boston Bulldogs had in the same process, who came into last week needing to win and get a bonus win. It was pretty evident early on that the win was not going to happen. So, oh yeah, all right. And for the Yellow Jackets, they actually had a shocker last week. They lost to the Memphis Hound Dogs and didn't score much at all. I think it was one of their lowest scoring weeks of the season. So you've got a team coming in with the highest point total the league's ever seen, up against the team coming in with a shocker. Doesn't mean much though, because fantasy football is a week-to-week commodity. What happened last week means very fucking little on what's going to happen this week. The Yellow Jackets offense. Oh, hang on. What was there? The head-to-head matchup was won by the Cardinals back in week 3, a 6-point win. So, yeah, obviously, nice and close game. Yellow Jackets offense will be led by Jalen Hurts playing the Ravens, Breece Hall playing the Seahawks, Kyron Williams against the Saints, and Zay Flowers against the Eagles. Obviously, they'll be hoping for some strong performances from them games. Defensively, Max Crosby, Zaire Franklin, Fred Warner, and Brian Branch are their standouts. I think Crosby's probably been a little quieter this season, but I do believe he's probably still suffering from an injury he got early in the season, so that he ended up playing through. But I do believe it's somewhat affected his performance. So Brian Branch has been ridiculous. Yeah. For the Cardinals, got a strong pair of quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes up against the Raiders and Kyler Murray against the Vikings. And then this 3-headed monster at running back. You got Derrick Henry, who's playing the Eagles. Saquon Barkley against the Ravens. Funny, we've mentioned this matchup a couple of times, haven't we? And Bijan Robinson up against the Chargers. Plus, they've got Trey McBride at tight end, who is up against the Vikings. On defense, they didn't have a lot of standouts on defense, but Danielle Hunter, who's been red hot, and Brandon Jones has had an underrated but damn good season. But in my opinion, it's the offense where this team either wins or dies. The Cardinals come in as one of the only 3 teams that cracked 5,000 points on the season. Now, obviously, you score 586 points in a week, it's going to boost your point total, but there's still one of only 3 that got over 5,000 points. They're an extremely dangerous team. and probably a team I think the LA Dons would prefer to see leave this week. However, outside of Mike's Pottsville Maroons beating Mr. Kruger's Bison, I don't think that will be the case. They will probably play either the Yellow Jackets or the Cardinals. I'm leaning to the Cardinals here. I think they're a really strong team, but the Yellow Jackets aren't a bad team by any stretch of the imagination either. Both can win, but I am leaning to the Cardinals. All right. So, last thing I wanted to do. I've ranked. I've got a few teams here. I've got a little bit of a ranking. This is my top 8 teams. Top 8 teams with a couple of honorable mentions for teams in the playoffs. Oh, crack a few things. I have to get ready for work. All right. The LA Dons, I think, enter as the clear favourites to win the league. They were 17-7 in the regular season, scored 5,199.56 points. And they were the clear point leader pretty much for the entire season. In my opinion, the next most dangerous team is the Staten Island Stapletons, Sean Smollen's team. Finished the season 15-9, 4,987.73 points, so just under that 5,000 point barrier. My reasoning for him being where he is, enters the playoffs as a number 2 seed, I think it is, whatever. Yeah, number 2 seed. But they don't have to play this week. They haven't got to try and win this week and next week and the week after and the week after. It's hard. My number 3 team is the Brooklyn Lions. Finished the season 18-6, number 1 seed in the Lambeau Conference, and scored 4,848.23 points on the season. Always a consistent team from Jake, so yeah. The next team I had on my list is the Dallas Texans, who finished the season at 18-6, 4,802.78 points on the season. So that's my 4th ranked team. They finished the season as the number 1 seed in the Brown Conference. Now, my number 5 seed is the Racine Legion. Finished the season at 17-7 with a 5,110.83 points. My reasoning for having this team where they are, they've got to run the gauntlet. They've got to run through this week as well. And that's my first team that I've got rated outside of any of the division winners that have got the bye weeks. And purely for that reason, that's why I've got them ranked where they are. Same goes for the Chicago Cardinals. Finished the season 14-10 with 5,001.78 points as my number 6 seed, or as my number 6 rank. My 7th ranked team is the Boston Redskins. Finished the season 19-5, 4,739.44 points. They're purely there because they've got the bye week. They don't have to worry about trying to navigate this week. And my 8th team I had down was the Buffalo Bison. 4,861.2 points and finished the season 15-9. They fall under the same thing as the Legion and the Cardinals do. They've got to try and navigate this week's games. My honourable mentions were the New York Cardex, who I think have a really strong team. The Hammond Pros, who have a really strong defense, tried to make some moves for the offense, but I think that's exactly the reason why this team won't go anywhere. The Chicago Tigers, who have a strong team, and Miami Seahawks, who I think also have a strong team. The Tigers' biggest problem is going to be those Ravens when they're missing next week. If they manage to get through this week, they've got to try and navigate a win, missing half their offense. So that'll be a tough one. Anyway, guys, this has gone as probably a little bit longer than I would have liked it to have. But thank you for watching. Thank you for being in the league. And best of luck to everyone that is still in the playoffs. Thanks, guys.